And we're back for You're All Doomed, the podcast that chops its way through Friday the 13th, Part 2, 13 minutes at a time. I'm arm wrestling welterweight Greg.
And I'm just Brian.
And this chunk starts in the middle of Paul's speech about the legend of Camp Crystal Lake and ends with Paul's witheringly sarcastic response to a police officer.
We heard the bulk of Paul's speech in the last episode, but there's, he adds a couple little juicy nuggets to the end of the speech before signing off. And he says, and he's hungry. Jason's out there, watching, always on the prowl for intruders, ready to kill, ready to devour, thirsty for young blood. Paul kind of loses me a bit on this last part of the speech. He takes what was a pretty creepy legend and then starts to extrapolate it to the point where he's adding too many things to it, and now it's just starting to sound silly.
Yeah, it's turning Jason into some sort of monster or something. I mean, are we meant to infer that Jason is a cannibal? I mean, he's talking about devouring and thirsty for young blood, and it's a very strange direction to be taking this speech. But it doesn't matter because it's cut short when a figure leaps into the center of the group wearing a caveman unitard and a scary-looking fright mask.
Is it Jason Statham?
Hey, everyone, I'm here. No, it's just Ted. He's dressed up like a scary troglodyte with a big spear and frightens everyone just like the way a good campfire story should end.
Yeah, and Paul was in on it the whole time. Like, he's the one that removes the mask from Ted to reveal who it really is. And I don't know, I think it kind of undercuts the message that Paul was trying to get across. Like, he was being serious. At least I got the impression that he was being serious, and he was really kind of like offering up a warning to these counselors about, where they are and what could be happening in this location where they are. And then Ted comes in and he's like, ha ha ha, it's all funny, it's a joke. And Paul's like, yeah. And it just kind of falls flat for me.
A little bit, except that Paul immediately follows it up with, all right, everybody, it's ancient history. Jason drowned, Mrs. Voorhees was killed, and Camp Crystal Lake is off limits. So he's having fun with it, but it's also kind of he's got a message at the end that, this is all fun and games, but just stay away from that place. All right,
that's true.
It's done with.
And it sounds like, we don't know exactly how close, but it sounds like Camp Crystal Lake is close enough that he has to tell the counselors to stay away from it.
Yeah,
so
he figures they're going to be interested if word about this has gotten around over the years.
Yeah, like Ted had alluded to it earlier, saying that they were going to the same lake, so we know that much, and then we know that Packanack Lodge is close enough to Camp Crystal Lake that it's a potential threat. So, starting to set the stage a little bit here.
Yeah, and I mean, I frankly, I'm a fan of Paul's management style here. I mean, again, in contrast to Steve Christie, he's willing to have a little fun. He's obviously got a sense of humor. He knows how to put Ted's pranksterism to good use, but he's also using it to make his point, and he does, kind of finish it off with a firm message to toe the line and don't go exploring.
So everyone's dispersed from the campfire tales, and they're all back at the Packanack Lodge, doing their various things. Ted is playing one of those handheld video games. There was an assorted, number of these. There was like a football game and a baseball game.
Mattel Electronics had their little handheld, LCD, or not even LCD. They were just like little
dot matrix or something. Yeah, I mean, very popular at the time. Sandra and Jeff are, kind of just fooling around, chasing each other around the lodge, and Mark and another counselor that I don't know if we ever get to find out who he is, but they're arm wrestling, and Mark is the guy in the wheelchair, and he wins. And there's a girl sitting close by. Her name is Vicky, and she seems kind of turned on by the fact that Mark wins so capably against this other guy.
I mean, she's drooling over that guy from the get-go.
Yeah, she's very, very impressed by how strong Mark is.
With strong arms.
Apparently.
While the arm wrestling is going on, Slingshot Boy Scott is standing over by the window like a total perv.
Popped collar and all.
Popped collar, basically staring at Terry, but leaning on the wall like he's just trying to decide which move he's going to make next, and which one's going to win her over. So he goes in to make his play, but gets cold-shouldered, so immediately diverts to Muffin the dog, whom he lifts up and begins dancing around the room with. And for the second movie in a row, we have a person having a full conversation with a dog. That must be a popular trope with the Friday the 13th series.
Yeah, apparently. And I'm also starting to wonder if Paul was talking about Scott when he was referring to the thirsty for blood and devouring young, because the way that he was looking at Terry, he
knows
right.
that she doesn't keep clean during her menstrual cycle. So
who knows what's going to happen?
Who knows?
Bears
Yikes.
and Scott could come calling.
While Jeff and Sandra are doing their little seductive dance with each other, I noticed some people in the background playing tabletop shuffleboard, just like at your parents' house.
Nice. But we're not the only ones watching what's going on. We see a POV shot of someone outside watching all of this take place through the windows of the lodge. We also see Ginny and Paul. They're playing chess by the fire. Ginny wins. Nice. She's trying to decide what to do next. She's kind of looking around the lodge and trying to find her next activity for the evening. And she wonders if she wants to get her arm broken by Mark in another arm wrestling match, or her brains, according to her, ponged by an electronical wizard, which I'm assuming would be Ted and his little handheld electronic games, or go to bed. And she decides that she's going to go to bed. And poor Paul, she's going alone.
Yeah, I mean, he's left pondering how he could have possibly lost the chess match. I guess is that a popular thing to post-mortem your chess defeat? Like you're completely baffled as to how someone managed to defeat your incredible strategy? I don't know.
Who knows?
But Ginny goes off to her cabin and begins to undress for the evening. A shadow crosses the outside wall of her cabin, and I don't know how visible this was in the VHS era, but on DVD it's pretty clear that this person is wearing a hat. While Ginny is in her cabin alone, all of a sudden Paul sneaks up on her, but it's like he appears right next to her from nowhere.
I'm not quite sure where he came from.
Yeah, where did he come? I mean, I kind of begin to wonder if he's a teleporter, which might explain a few things later on, frankly. But yeah, I mean, it's just he's there. And they banter a little bit and then immediately begin embracing, and cuts back outside, and we see the legs of someone outside the cabin again watching what's going on inside. The camera slowly pans up, but it's Ralph. It's Crazy Ralph.
He has made his way to Packanack Lodge.
Yeah, and I mean, I'm not sure what Ralph's going for here. Is he enjoying what he's watching, or is he, these fool kids, they don't know what they're, they shouldn't be doing that in this area. I mean, I'm not sure what exactly his purpose.
For me, this is definitely where Ralph crosses the line from Crazy Ralph into pervert Ralph. He's not there to warn anyone. He's clearly kind of getting his rocks off watching all this take place. And it's a little creepy, and for all the wrong reasons in a movie like this. Like, we don't need to see this. It's a little, you shouldn't be standing there, and we shouldn't be watching you standing there.
Yeah, it's uncomfortable. I mean, I wonder if years of his warnings being ignored, but he continuously trying to keep people away from this camp have driven Ralph even crazier and crazier, and now he finds that a perverse sense of enjoyment and or justification for what he really wishes he were doing, which is masturbating furiously.
Oh God!
But he's
thanks for putting that image in my head.
He's got a flimsy pretext for being there to cling to, but really, what's going on is a lot more moist.
Ugh.
Yeah.
One thing I noticed is when Paul and Ginny are kind of like gently making out. And she pauses for a second, and she goes, "Paul, I think there's something I should tell you." But she never finishes her thought. And so I'm wondering if you have any idea of what that could have been.
I mean, at first I thought maybe she was going to tell him that she was pregnant, or that,
I thought that too.
There was, some unforeseen consequence of their relationship. But, that jumped out at me too, and I was curious to see if we if we'll find out what the answer is.
Maybe.
So, just after Ginny inserts that little half-finished pause into the makeout session, cuts back outside to Ralph peeping, and he hears a snap of twigs and, turns with his back now to the tree when an impossibly tall Jason throws a cord around the tree to strangle Ralph.
Looked like barbed wire to me. It's not.
I have a note that looking more closely, it actually is barbed wire. But I mean, again, the arms from the other side of the tree are at the level of Ralph's head or higher.
Yeah, it doesn't make sense Ralph is definitely standing up, so you can't say, oh, he's sitting on the ground with his back against the tree.
Or anything. No, he's full on standing up.
Standing up. And the person that grabs him from behind, I mean, there's no other way to describe it other than the person is 9 or 10 feet tall, and they actually have to reach down to put the barbed wire around his neck. Because I also looked to see if maybe the person was up in the tree and was somehow leaning down to get him, but no, it really...
It's obviously someone standing on a box behind the tree.
There's in order to get to the right height.
And it's the tree that Ralph was peering around moments ago and didn't see anyone standing there. And yet when he's distracted and turns away, suddenly there's someone behind the tree who kills him. Sure, it's shocking and spooky, but watching it in this method, picking it apart, you're like, wait a second, what's going on here? It makes no sense. But that's the end of Crazy Ralph.
Yeah, so long, Ralph.
He's just been strangled by a barbed wire.
Crazy Ralph was played by Walt Gorney. He has some interesting, facts in his biography. He was born on April 12th, 1912, which some people might know as the day the Titanic sank. He was born in Vienna, Austria. He was also a member of a theatrical group called the Provincetown Players in the early 1950s. So I like to picture this, younger, Crazy Ralph kind of, gallivanting around a stage, maybe singing some kind of show tunes and, doing some community theater or summer stock. He didn't really have a ton of theatrical credits, probably just, because he's kind of a strange guy, but he definitely made his name in this movie. But he did have one credit where he was the subway driver in the 1976 version of King Kong.
Yeah, I remember when I was watching it a few years ago and he popped up and it was actually his neck that made me think, that's got to be Walt Gorney. And sure enough, it was. I was pretty excited to see him.
Good old Walt died on March 5th, 2004.
Yeah, at the age of 91. Yeah. Everything that I had read, kind of indicated that he was a really delightful guy on set and was a lot of fun to have around for those two movies. So, he'll be missed. So with the end of Ralph, the scene transitions again to morning, and Ginny wakes up in bed wearing Paul's shirt.
Ooh.
Yeah. So then she kind of blearily looks around the room. Paul's gone, but she happens to see the mirror where Paul has written in lipstick, "Beware of bears." So I think we just learned what Ginny had to tell Paul when she paused during the makeout session.
I've never made that connection before. Wow.
Yeah. So Paul's a brave guy. Ginny's a forgiving
Earning
woman.
his red wings.
Yeah. So, yeah, good for them. That's fine. Obviously, their passion is sincere.
The next morning, the counselors are out for a jog, which I suppose is part of their counselor training to get physical fitness, badge or something.
Forced march or something.
Yeah.
Yeah, so there's 13 joggers, including Ginny, and then Mark and Paul are off to the side kind of monitoring everyone's progress. Mark is wearing a jersey with the number 24 on it and the words Bala Kinwood, which I looked up, and it's a city in Pennsylvania. So I did a little bit more research to find out what this jersey could possibly have been, and my best guess is that it's a Lower Merion High School jersey. The team mascot for that school are the Lower Merion Aces, and Kobe Bryant played there.
No way.
Yeah. So I'm thinking it's a basketball jersey, and Kobe Bryant might have been around in this area. So that's kind of cool. Mark makes some sort of sarcastic comment as Jeff runs by, and Jeff gives him the finger. Flat out just gives him the finger. So, obviously Jeff is not intimidated by Mark's physical capabilities or limitations, and, treats him like he would treat anyone else who smart mouths him. So that was good to see. So then we cut to Baggy Pants stomping through the woods with some labored breathing. You can actually hear and so something's going on there.
It can't be Ralph because he's dead.
He's dead. So it's obviously whoever killed Ralph, and they need to have their respiratory canals checked. We see Terry wearing a tube top, and 12-year-old Greg is in the other room yelling, guys, mention the tube top. So there you go. And we see some more point of view shots of Baggy Pants. And in one, Ginny looks right at the camera. So, I mean, it's just another instance where I have a problem with point of view shots in movies like this, because there aren't even any branches in the way or anything. She literally looks right at the camera.
Yeah.
So if that's the killer, she absolutely sees someone standing there. It's a little bit ridiculous.
Yeah, at the very least, she should at least pause for a second and kind of like squint, like, am I seeing something there? And at least acknowledge, like, oh, well, I think I see something, but I'm not quite sure. Right. Oh, it's nothing. I'll just leave. It's just, there's no acknowledgement. It's just like, oh, I'm going to look right at you and I'm going to walk away.
Yeah, exactly. And then we see Muffin padding through the ferns like a goddamn Ewok, and she stops at Baggy Pants' feet and looks up.
And then there's a pretty funny quick cut where suddenly we see hot dogs on the grill.
Yeah.
And it's like the first real kind of attempt at humor, in this, at least in this movie, where it's kind of like
it's a witty edit that a little bit of whimsy added into the proceedings, which that was a nice little touch.
But it's done purely to get a chuckle, because as soon as we see that scene, Terry goes off into the woods trying to figure out where Muffin is.
Right. So everyone's back at the camp and kind of doing their lunchtime thing. We witness Ginny using a chainsaw. That's a good setup for
potentially, yeah,
future use. One of the counselors that we haven't really seen a lot of in the background is a redhead with glasses, wearing a mustard-colored T-shirt and green khaki shorts. I'm not 100% certain that that's not my wife. I've never asked her if she was in Friday the 13th Part 2, but it might be my wife.
It would be pretty amazing if suddenly you realized it is her.
And frankly, she is like, her memory is such that she would have forgotten to tell me that. And I'm like, oh yeah,
that time I was at camp and the camera crew was there and they just told us to act natural. Yeah.
Meanwhile, Baggy Pants is kind of doing a sinister recon of the camp. He's lurking behind buildings, and he's kind of watching where everyone goes. It's very systematic, and he's getting the lay of this place, which is super ominous. I kind of dig that he's kind of gone commando here.
Mm-hmm.
Well, he's wearing underpants, I'm sure, but
we hope.
We hope. Bunch of the kids are now down at the lake. Some of them are out on a fixed raft, a big wooden platform out in the lake, pushing each other off. And at one point, Terry gets pushed off, and it looks like she nearly gets hurt. There's a vertical pole on the, like, almost like part of the ladder to get back on this thing, and she nearly hits it with her knee.
Oh.
And it looks like she wasn't expecting to be pushed right then. So I mean, it looks like it might have been a kind of a close call for the actress. It kind of jolted me out of the movie. On the shore, Ginny is leaning against a lifeguard tower, telling really juvenile jokes to Mark and Vicky. She tells the old, what's green and goes 1,000 miles an hour, a frog in a blender, which, I mean, I think I laughed at that one when I was in second grade or something. And then out of the sky, seemingly, obviously in the lifeguard chair, Ted leaps down wearing a metal pith helmet, and he tells a poop joke about Beethoven's final movement or something. But when he says what's brown and sits on a piano, Vicky's response is your face. What? What kind of comeback is that?
Right.
And just like even kind of like a mean-spirited attempt to deflate the joke. Like, your face, like she's sick of Ted's constant poop puns or something. And so, I mean, I was like, where is this going? Yeah. It was kind of a random attack, but maybe she was just embarrassed by his metal pith helmet.
So up until this point, Jeff and Sandra have kind of been wavering back and forth about whether or not they should go check out Camp Blood, or, what we know as Camp Crystal Lake. Paul has told them not to go. It's dangerous, and they just don't belong there. But they're curious. They were, intrigued by what Ted had to say earlier when they were off the, moving the branch off the side of the road. And he was telling them, oh, you don't want to know about it. Now Jeff and Sandra are like, well, let's go check it out. So they start trudging through the woods, and they find a no trespassing sign, and they figure they must be pretty close. And, they keep, heading in that direction. And, but we also notice that someone is following them close behind. While they're walking through the woods toward, what they think is Camp Blood, they find a carcass of what appears to be a dead dog.
Either that or the Rankin Bass Abominable Snowman.
Also a possibility.
Yeah, that's the fakest looking dead dog I've ever seen.
Yeah, it's we're not exactly sure what it is, but it certainly doesn't look good for Muffin. There's a lot of white fur, and it's a pretty small animal. And the last time we saw Muffin, she was at the feet of someone. So they're kind of grossed out about it, but as they're examining it, they're startled by a police officer.
Yeah, I mean, because, of course, police crawl out of the woodwork around these parts. Even though his cruiser, with lights flashing, is clearly visible in their peripheral vision.
It's like 20 feet off the side of the road. So, like, they're not even in the deep woods anymore. They're just, like, walking along the side of the road.
Yeah, and I mean, if they're looking at the dog, they're seeing the flashing lights of the police cruiser.
Yeah.
So they've been busted, and we're now back at the training center. They're being hauled before their boss Paul by this police officer to get
Deputy Winslow.
Deputy Winslow to get dressed down. Paul is sitting there listening to the officer, kind of disinterested, but he's wearing a pretty awesome senior counselor training course T-shirts with an emblem that has crossed hatchets on it.
I love that.
I totally want that.
Me too.
He doesn't look quite as cool with the Yankees cap that he's got perched on his head, but that T-shirt kicks ass. But speaking of wardrobe choices, I noticed that the deputy is wearing a Sebastopol police patch on his police uniform. That's in California. Oops. But we could order one of those patches from eBay. They're only about $5.
If anyone wants to get one of those for us, just let us know. We'll send you our address. Yeah, I mean, basically, Deputy Winslow is just telling Paul that he likes what Paul's doing with these kids, with the counselors. He thinks it's a great opportunity, and he just wishes that he would have set it up in the next county. So he's also acknowledging that, hey, maybe you should just stay away from this lake. There's a bad reputation. We don't need to encourage any bad behavior. I wish you had done this, set up your shop somewhere else.
Yeah, I mean, at first he seems like he's kind of on Paul's side, but just wants to keep everyone in line and keep people out of trouble. But then when Paul kind of sends Jeff and Sandra off with just a small scolding, the police officer kind of turns on him and is shocked that Paul's not going to punish his people in any way, and he's immediately offended and no punishment. What kind of place is this?
Yeah, and I don't know why does he care? Like what is he most angry about? Is he angry that there's this counselor training center set up on Crystal Lake, or is he upset that his counselors aren't getting in trouble for misbehaving?
Yeah, he kind of takes it to the line of bureaucratic authoritarianism more than actual genuine concern for people's safety. But that gives Paul the opportunity to just decimate the police officer by calling to Jenny and saying, "Tell Jeff and Sandra no dessert after dinner." And it just puts the cop in his place. So the segment ends with the just look of being totally trumped on the cop's face. He's just staggered at how he's been hammered into the ground by this comment. It was fantastic.
Yeah, and this made me like Paul even more because I mean, I think I understand Deputy Winslow's point, but I think he's just crossing a line, and he's just taking it too far. Like, okay, we get it. They shouldn't have been there. They're not going to go back. And Paul's reaction to it just makes me like Paul even more.
Yeah, and Paul's like, you're not going to tell me how to run my camp, buddy. You're a cop and we'll respect your rules, but you're not going to boss me around in my camp.
But I also love Ginny's reaction, which is just kind of like this side-eye kind of smirk. Like, she doesn't even have to say anything. She's just like, okay.
Yep. Yeah, that was a pretty spectacular end to the segment. Anything else you've got?
No, I don't have anything.
All right. Well, to recap the deaths here, we say farewell to Crazy Ralph and Walt Gorney.
I'm going to miss Crazy Ralph.
I will too. Although, like you said, he was getting a little on the dark side at the end there.
Yeah.
So I'm glad maybe we're glad he didn't stick around for part 3. It might have gone even further.
Yeah, we didn't need to see pervy Ralph in another movie.
Yeah, agreed. So come back for the next episode, and I'm Greg.
And I'm Brian.
You're all doomed.